5 of new business, ordinance number 2015-082.
Ordinance number 2015-082 is an ordinance to proceed with an increase to the rate of the City of Lebanon, Ohio earnings tax from 1% per annum to 1 1/4% per annum effective January 1, 2016 by amending sections 151.03, 151.04, and 151.06 of the Lebanon Code of Codified Ordinances, the original City of Lebanon, Ohio earnings tax ordinances, and declaring an emergency.
This legislation will establish the authorization to proceed with an increase to the rate of the city's earnings tax from 1% to 1 1/4% for the purpose of maintenance, resurfacing, and new construction of public roadways for a period not to exceed 5 years, commencing January 1st, 2016.
I know we're going to have lots of conversation about this, but can I get a motion to adopt?
So moved.
I second.
So questions and comments?
Oh, first question I have would be for Ms. Dick is about the, would there be a separate fund set up to keep track of the additional 25% that's supposed to be earmarked expressly only for roadway improvements out of the city earnings tax, so we can keep track of course, we can't, we're going to be required to use that extra 1/4% for the roads.
That's correct.
Before you get, just before she answers, I just wanted to make clear, I think you were misspoke when you said 25%, and in the interest of nobody having a cardiac arrest.
Oh, quarter.
While they're watching.
1/4%, sorry.
Yeah, it's 0.25%.
0.25.
Welcome to Lebanon.
Sorry about that. I knew what I meant.
I'd make you want to stay, right?
We can earmark the money and receive the revenue into the capital improvement fund for street projects. We won't establish a new fund.
Because we've already have a capital improvement plan that we just approved tonight that goes through the next 5 years. And money has already been set aside for road improvements for the next 5 years. And I want to, if this passes and if the voters approve this, I'd like to make sure we have some way of promising the voters that that amount that we've already have set aside in the budget for roadways will continue to go for roadways on top of the 1/4%. See what I'm saying? And if there's some way we can...
We will definitely find a way to do that. There is a way to account for that 1/4%.
And so the citizens can see that easily, that we're not reducing what we already have in our capital plan for the next 5 years. That this is truly an additional 1/4% is truly going for roadways.
Yes.
On top of what we have already planned for roadways.
I can assure you that's how that will be done.
That's the only comment I have so far.
If I may, Your Honor, I support putting this measure on the ballot, and indeed I support the passage of this measure by the citizens of the City of Lebanon. The fact of the matter is, the City of Lebanon continues to adjust to the loss of several key general revenue sources. This has been the case for many years. The hole in the budget is hitting the roads most harshly. We have a citizen here who spoke earlier about his desire to get the roads near his house up to a livable standard. I support his request, and I support the request of many others who have come here prior to him, asking for specific roads and alleys to be paved. If we don't maintain these roads now, it will cost the city 7 or 8 times the amount of money to bring our codes, to bring our roads, or that is to maintain our roads over the long run. That 7 or 8 factor is a figure given to us by staff, and I haven't heard anyone challenge it. A fiscal conservative, which I think everyone on this council considers himself or herself to be, would vote for this revenue measure, because it is only smart to pay less now than far more later in order to achieve the same result. The people of Lebanon deserve good roads. The industry of Lebanon deserves good roads. The city of Lebanon is more aesthetically pleasing with good roads. And it would be most efficient to maintain those roads if this measure were passed. Frankly, I haven't heard an argument not to pass this revenue measure in the many meetings that we have had on this subject. So I'll be voting for the measure. I encourage the rest of my council members to vote for it. I encourage the citizens of Lebanon to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll take a stab at it.
Go for it.
In fact, I mean, I may end up taking the rest of the evening, unfortunately, but I mean, I've got a perpetual amount of information and facts. Before we vote on this measure, I mean, we've talked about this several times, and through the last course of many years, we've taken a stab at putting increases through potential income tax levies, road levies, that kind of thing. In fact, last year we threw 2 pieces of spaghetti up against the wall to see if they would stick, and they both failed. I will applaud this particular council that we actually found an idea that actually presented a solution rather than a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. However, when I came on council in 2003, 2004, we started with a $52 million budget. We're at $80 million now, okay? Last year, coincidentally, we were at $82 million, so we've taken a $2 million hit to where we were versus last year. But just for all intents and purposes, let's just say our budget has increased $30 million. That being the case, we still don't have the resources of $1.5 million to be able to source the problem of the streets. The 3 criteria of this council, or really any council, should be emergency services, infrastructure, and parks. And for whatever reason, we come up with a $1.5 million loss every single year where we can't fund the streets. So I have a perpetual problem, and I know that when we've gone into discussion over and over again, we've said that we've turned over every single stone, and we've just simply not been able to come up with the money. Well, I've done my research, and I think that, unfortunately, I mean, it hurts, but, I've come up with a proposal that brings right about $1.5 million, but in all sense and purposes, it'll be probably closer to $1 million after everything is said and done. That's my particular proposal. It's not going to be easy. It's going to hurt. But it's essential. And I think from the ability of being able to be responsible and fiscally conservative is looking inside and finding out what we need to do to better fiscally manage our finances, as opposed to keep going to the public and asking them to empty out their wallets yet again. I've had our city auditor do a little bit of a report for me, and we started in 2000 of an employee payroll of close to $7.6 million. To date, we're at $16 million, and with the increases of longevity, COLA, and performance increase over the last 15 years, that's an increase of about $3.9 million just in longevity, COLA, and performance increases, give or take a few percentage variances. We've gone from 150 plus employees to roughly about 127, and yet our payroll is more than doubled. In addition to the fact that those bonuses have, $3.9 million worth of increases. We have payroll issues in the city. There are positions that just unfortunately are higher than where they need to be. We have heard over and over again when we've seen car dealers or, union labor organizations, seniority, they get a chance to pick the position, they're making 95 to 100 and some $1,000s, all based on seniority. Well, we've got that going on here too, ladies and gentlemen. And it's just, you look at these salaries and you look at where we are as a city, and we've got cops and we've got firefighter problems, and we're not addressing them. And that's an issue. We are underfunded in those two areas, and we're hurting. And we're hurting on the streets too. Literally, the streets are hurting. I've come up with a proposal where we would have to cut somewhere in the neighborhood of about $350,000 worth of jobs. And another department, which I've looked at as far as duplication of services, and I'll go to that in greater detail, but we're looking at these particular options that have been repeated over to us for the last few years of eliminate the civic donation program of $18,000, stormwater utility fees for $62,000, get rid of the City Hall Visitor Center for $4,000, discontinue the future rail bridge replacement for $95,000, get rid of the maintenance tax credit by, get rid of the income tax credit by 0.5%. That was almost done several years ago. And a 5-year, $1.5 million road levy, it's worth about $600,000. Again, I will admit that when we look at the propensity of where we are at with this particular deal, it at least looks at trying to solve the problem. I do like that issue. But when I look at the overall budget and I look at where we are as a city, and some of these services that we have are considered luxuries. And again, the one that I'm looking at in particular that would save almost $1.2 million is our court system. The municipal court system costs this city roughly $1.123 million a year and generates revenue of about $500,000. We're at about a $700,000 a year loss in this city with this municipal court system. And we have a county court system that's less than a half a mile away that could be consolidated and put into use through the county court system and save this city a minimum of $700,000 a year. There was a court consolidation study that was done on July 26, 2013. And the most important of all of the facts in this particular study is the safety of every single employee in this city building. This system, the safety measures, are substandard and would cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to substantiate safer. Our probation department's unsafe, the employees that work in here, the citizens that come in and pay their utility bills, it's unsafe.
Matt, will you please keep your comments to facts and not
They are
conjecture,
facts.
please?
I've absolutely got facts right here. In fact, I'd be more than happy to go into detail. Public entering the City Hall and Probation Department are not screened. There is a small screening station located immediately outside the court doors. No screening is provided when court is not in session. There is a general lack of in-custody holding facilities, lack of secure vehicle transport space, lack of dedicated holding cells, lack of gun lockers for in-custody transport personnel. I can go on, ladies and gentlemen. The point of the matter is, when you look at where we are as a city, $80 million budget, we can absolutely cut, and we should, before we come to your house and ask you to empty out your wallet. Now, to address this actual tax increase, I've had people say that I, ethically, in last week's meeting, am voting no just simply because I can. I find that funny. I vote no because I'm against a particular issue, not because I feel that I have to vote in one voice. However, we will address this issue. you've got a quarter of a percent income tax increase. That's going to generate about $1.6 million. Will that solve the issue of the roads? Potentially. It'd certainly help. More importantly, when you're looking at this issue, well, you know, Vice Mayor Messer, you're apparently the master origin of this proposal. Do you have the sweet points of all of these for this particular deal that you want to explain to the city as far as what this proposal will do?
I'll let you continue and then I'll finish up. We've got plenty of people that want to speak, so go ahead.
Well, I'll go ahead and give everybody a break. They can go ahead and go from there. I'll rebuttal later.
Anybody else like to speak?
I would. We are in a bind, and the roads definitely do need to be addressed. I believe that state and federal legislation and intrusion over many decades has left every one of us in an increasingly restrictive bind. Currently, individuals, employers, small businesses are hampered by state and federal policy. Now, we are not addressing state and federal policy at this point. This is at a different level of government that we cannot affect as a board, only as voting individuals. I believe that because of the state and federal tax policy, it has hindered economic growth. I think it has hindered economic recovery, and I feel like we are being taxed into dependence. I feel like because of the policies at other levels of government, that individuals and families are more dependent, and cities, just like ours, are more dependent. We can hardly pave a road without a grant. And that's frustrating as a city. And I feel like it is definitely what those at higher levels of government have wanted. So we're left with an increasingly tight budget. And roads cost, frankly, what they cost because they are, because governments are the ones that pay for the roads, primarily. And we see the same thing happening in other industries, healthcare and whatnot, but roads is a huge problem nationwide, huge problem nationwide. And it's been decades in the making. Big government is getting bigger, local governments are tightening our belt, we budget, we scrimp, we prioritize, we reprioritize, we do without, we ask for volunteers, we get volunteers, that's great. However, it's not our ideal situation. I do disagree with anyone that thinks that increasing taxes is beneficial to individuals and families and to our community. I think it actually creates dependence. I do want to address the roads. I do believe this tax increase is a mirage of a fix, unfortunately. Thank you.
I'd like to say I am probably Councilman Kaiser and I, we've talked about this before, and I would say that of the options that I've been given, the options that have been talked about, this makes the most sense to me. This fluctuates with an individual's taxable income. 74% of the general fund revenue comes in from people who do not live in the city. It also is on the ballot for a 5-year time period and will give the voters an opportunity to look at what we have done with the tax increase over a 5-year period, and when it's placed back up, they can either vote it down or vote it through again. It is not a property increase or property tax increase. I did not support that the last time that it came to the board, because I find it atrocious that you can't own anything in this country anymore. that you can pay off your house and still pay $500-600 a month to live there. If you don't pay it, you get evicted. I believe that of the options that we have been presented, notwithstanding hamstringing ourselves by getting rid of our court system and consolidating power at the county, I believe that the citizens of Lebanon are an independent breed of people, and they removing certain things from their jurisdiction would not be prudent. We've talked about comms. We've talked that and removing that and putting that to the county. We see, we've talked to police officers and police chiefs, and we understand that that is not a good decision. We've talked, Mr. Rodriguez brought up.
For comm center or for court?
Comms.
Okay.
And I believe that would be the same thing with court. So I do believe that this is our best option, even though I don't particularly like the fact that there has to be, or there needs to be a tax increase. But I do believe that it is our best option in the place that we've been put.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could make some comments. I applaud Council Member Monroe's comments about the fact that we are strapped as a community. Smaller communities, local communities are under increasing control by higher government. We can't do much without government grants anymore. It's the higher government takes the money and then they give it back as much as they want to give back to us. But in that regard too, as a locality and as a member of this city council board, we have to take care of our city. We also have to try to, and so we have to prepare and take care of our own roads, no matter how bad it is. We can't be dependent on government grants anymore because they aren't coming out like we're giving to them. We could urge our citizens, and I would urge our citizens to be diligent in their elections and how they look at who they elect, especially in the higher levels of government, our congressmen and our senators, to make sure that they are really looking at our best interests. So I applaud your comments there, but in the same sense, being a locality, we do have to take care of ourselves. The comments Mr. Messer made about property taxes, I agree also that you can be, the locality here, increasing of property taxes is becoming more and more burdensome, especially since our schools are getting less state funding and they have to go after property taxes. You can't really, we'll make a comment, you really never own property, land, because you can't pick it up and move it. It's always subject to the rules and regulations of where it is, and you can't take it and move it someplace else. So you never really own the property, you only own the rights to use it, subject to the rules and laws of the government. But I also agree that less rules and regulations of the government is in the best interest of all citizens. But I would be in favor of this proposal because we're proposing to our citizens whether they want to increase the money they give to our locality. If there's some way they could vote to give less to a higher organization that doesn't trickle back down to us, I urge them to do that too, but I would urge them to vote for this because this is where we live and this is our city and we have to take care of ourselves. We can't be dependent on state and federal for taking care of us.
Mr. Clements, could you talk specifically to the budget cuts and the budget work that you have done over the past 12 years? As
You want me to go back through 12 years?
I don't need you to go back
budgeteering?
with specific things, but there were some certain comments that our budget has increased $30 million over a 12-year period. And I need to understand that as fact or fiction.
Well, I'm certainly not going to, comment directly on comments that are made from the dais here, but the operating budget is currently approximately $80 million. It's broken up into over 50 different funds. Specific to the road maintenance funding shortfall issue, has been pointed out in previous reports. That problem is really isolated to a relatively small number of those funds. It's primarily involving the funds that use general revenue. The vast majority of the city's $80 million operating budget is consumed with utility enterprises. So again, there's really only a small portion of the overall budget that is related to road maintenance. With regards to the history of the management of the budget over the 14 years I've been here, I would really be beyond the scope of this meeting to go through. Obviously, we look at the budget very carefully every year. And I think has been pointed out, the staffing levels of the full-time staffing levels of the city have been reduced from about 156 full-time to currently they're at 127 full-time staff members, and that's been done largely through increased use of contract labor, increased use of part-time and seasonal staff members, the discontinuation of some services. The normal things that you would expect a municipality to do, those are being done. But as I've pointed out in work sessions, as lean as we are now, there's always more to do, and we should continue as an administration to continue to look at opportunities, to be more efficient and more, and more cost, just reduced overall operating costs.
Mm-hmm. Matt, sounds like you got more.
I do. I mean,
Go for it.
I'm kind of like scratching my head here when you're saying fact versus fiction, because I mean, numbers don't lie, Mark. And when I look at the budget, and when I came in here, I know the budget pretty well. When I look at it and I see $52 million as a total budget, and then I see $80 million as a total budget, that's just numbers that you can't deviate from. That court system comes from the general revenue fund. So when you're looking at basically a $1.1 million expenditure, after everything is said and done, revenue versus the expenditure, there's a $700,000 disparity. It's a 2-to-1 loss.
I'm sorry.
Can I ask Councilman Rodriguez a question? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine.
We did have a study about the possibility of merging a few of the courts.
Mm-hmm.
And we discussed it, and I don't recall any council members supporting that plan.
Yeah.
Did you support that plan?
Absolutely.
That plan never actually got to a county meeting. The Lebanon and Franklin County judges were the one that precipitated the plan, and we're hoping that the expansion proposals of the 4 different proposals that were issued were going to show that their court system was going to be expanded. The opposite was true. There were 2 meetings that were scheduled that were never followed up with, never showed up with, and it became a dead issue.
Right, but
So,
we did
in
discuss
fact,
the study.
2013, late October of 2013, there was a meeting that was scheduled that was canceled because none of the judges showed up to that meeting.
Okay.
And it became a dead issue. The point of the matter is you've got 4 relevant options here, 2 of which are viable. One that's being, well, first of all, the difference between county and city as far as muni court goes is you've got 4 courts. You've got the county muni, you've got Mason, Lebanon, and Franklin. The only one that's doing a decent job is Mason. Mason's being held off on. You've got Lebanon and Franklin. You've got a scenario where you've got a county muni court that's serving the propensity of all of the other county counterparts that don't have the luxury of having a car. And I mentioned the word luxury. We're less than a half a mile away from there. Our police services would scoot less than a quarter mile down the road here to do the same duplication of services. When I'm looking at the safety of every single employee in this building and citizens coming in, there are potential hazards. Just from the safety aspect of it alone, not to mention the fact from a revenue standpoint.
I just want to be clear. So you support this city releasing its court services to the county?
Well, we would need to negotiate what the payment structure would be, but I mean, certainly, absolutely.
Okay, so you would like to close this court and all the judicial services will be transferred to the county?
If it is going to save the city, absolutely. 700,000 or more, potentially, absolutely.
And did I just understand you to suggest that we should merge our police department with the sheriff's office? Is that
No,
what
I
you were
didn't say that
suggesting?
at all,
You
no.
said something about the county has law enforcement just 5 minutes down the
I
road?
didn't say law enforcement. I said they have a county municipal court system down there.
Okay.
They
So
have
you
a county,
want?
not law services, no.
Okay. And
No.
how about our communication services?
Our communication center is a separate entity, and I've supported the communication center from day one and will continue to do that because I firsthand have seen the benefit of having a comm center that has saved lives and/or calls. And I'm sure there's 1 or 2 past council members who actually had those services in addition to myself that could witness that as well. So I am still in support of the communication center, absolutely.
But you don't support the city maintaining control of its own justice system.
Why would we need to have, I mean, do you have some, are you saying that the county is at some form of irrelevance?
No, I believe in maintaining control and direct
So should-
representation
So
of my constituents.
should every city have their own court system? Because not every city has their own court system.
But
There's
Lebanon's-
townships,
Lebanon's a little
there's
special.
other viable villages, and there's other cities that don't have the ability to have it and rely strictly
They
on the
don't have the
county.
ability to have it.
They don't have the ability to have it.
Okay.
Okay, so you're looking at duplication of services. Tell me why a city court system is better than a county system, especially when it's a 2-to-1 loss ratio, when it comes to a revenue stream. There's no benefit of having a
So what
city.
keeps the county from raising the prices? And then all of a sudden, we're done.
What's
And all of
what's the point of us not raising taxes? We got a 1.6 million tax levy on here. We got a 1.6 million income tax levy right here. We're increasing people's taxes. We're asking you, ladies and gentlemen, to look deeper into your wallet when we can do essentially the same in here.
Okay,
So-
but, may I say something?
What? Yeah, go for it.
Transferring all our court services from the city to a different political entity is a major decision. There are all sorts of policy implications. And we, in fact, looked at all of those policy implications about a year ago when a study was produced suggesting some plans. I don't recall anyone on our city council arguing for that. A year ago, we were talking about putting a different revenue measure on the ballot. And you and Councilmember Monroe and perhaps others argued that before we do that, we need to look at our budget and start making cuts. From that night till right now, I have not heard of a single cut by you or Councilmember Monroe or anyone else on the council that was put on the table, vetted by our staff, analyzed by our staff, and seriously considered by our council. And we're not going to sit here on the eve of The moment at which we have to make a decision whether we're going to put this revenue measure on the ballot and talk about cutting our entire court system.
You know what,
Let's not forget the fact that you championed this vote for the entire council session last week.
You know,
And if you would like to listen to it, you can just go to our website.
You know what, and quite honestly, I'll be more than happy to talk specifically about that, considering the fact you said last year that you didn't vote for a property tax increase and you voted for it to be put on the table before you voted against it, like you've done 3 or 4 other times on
So
other
we can get the
various
vote
matters.
through.
Okay.
So here's the deal. We've been talking about this for about 40 minutes now. And we have a motion and we have a second.
We do,
Would you please call the roll?
certainly. Mr. Deary?
I haven't said that I'm done.
You're done.
I'm done.
Yep.
Mr. Deary?
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez?
No.
Mr. Kaiser?
Yes?
Mrs. Monroe?
No.
Vice Mayor Messer?
Yes.
Mr. Norris?
Yes.
So the vote is 4-2,
That's correct.
meaning that this will act as a first reading of this ordinance because 5 votes, for those watching, are necessary to have this measure be passed as what's called an emergency measure, meaning that in an emergency situation, council can pass by a supermajority an ordinance, and it will go into effect on the passage date. With an ordinary ordinance, if there's no emergency language, that measure would have a second reading 2 weeks hence, and then would also take 30 days to go into effect. A little educational point there. This measure was placed on the agenda as an emergency measure, but did not receive the required 5 votes. Therefore, this reading acts as a first reading, and a second reading would be necessary in order for this to pass. The measure's not defeated, it just is going to be going through the regular process of passing as a standard ordinance.
And if I could add to that, Mr. Urick, with regards to the council schedule, tonight is the last scheduled meeting of the city council for July. The cutoff for submission of ballot language to the Board of Elections is the 5th of August. This legislation is really just the first legislative step that's necessary in order to put ballot language or to execute the placement of ballot language on the ballot. So at this point, council's options would be to schedule a special meeting for later this month to address this ordinance again, if council feels they'd like to do that. There would also need to be another special meeting scheduled after that to address the second item of legislation, which would be a resolution to approve the placement. So without the 5th vote and without the scheduling of a special meeting, the first reading of this ordinance and the 5 August cutoff date really renders it moot.
So do I need to get a show of hands or a majority of people who want to?
Not at this point, unless you want to. Council, per charter, can call a special meeting for certain reasons. If this measure does, seeing that the measure needs to be sent over to the county no later than August 5th, if this measure doesn't receive 5 votes at some point, I would suggest that it's moot at this point, because we're here on the 14th of July. So
There's also timing issues with the Board of Elections sending the legislation to the state for approval.
correct.
And we're running out of time.
And if this passed, should it pass, it needs to be sent over to the county, then they need to send it up to the state. And there are time limits that they have in order to do that. Then they have to send it back, and then we have to resolve to send the ballot language over to the county again.
Are we saying we meet again this week? Are we saying we meet next week? Or is it pretty much done?
Well, I can't answer that question intelligently without knowing what the vote's going to be. Because if
Well,
the
let's
vote's
start-
going to be
let's-
4-2 again,
Let's start
it's not
with
really
that.
going to make much difference.
Let's start
You-
with that.
You need Mayor Brewer to be
We're not
in
all here.
attendance. Right.
Yeah, there's people on vacation.
Right, so just schedule it for when Mayor Brewer is available and everyone else is too. And I'm in favor of moving this along. We've talked and talked and talked and talked, and I'm personally will be available at pretty much any time, all the way up to the deadline, I'm available. And I would support having whatever special meetings are necessary.
Does that canvas for attendance to carry out our business have to take place right now? I realize our time, and I knew that tonight was kind of it. But if we can say that we would have not just a quorum, but we would have
Everyone.
even potentially all of us there at a certain point, let's say, and for my schedule, I'm going to have to propose the last Tuesday in July. If I can run that, is that getting out of the bounds of getting the job done?
That's very close.
End of July.
I couldn't guarantee that the state could get it back to us by then.
End of July would be, I think and I'm speaking off the cuff, so please don't hold me to this. I believe that they need to send that back and ordinarily do somewhere around 5 to 10 days.
That's correct.
So, if it's July 30th, the answer is don't bother because they'll never get it up to the state.
I don't know
and
what
give it
that
back.
Tuesday is. It's maybe that bad.
That Tuesday is the 28th. So
I wouldn't.
Question I
wouldn't
have.
guarantee it.
Well, we can't guarantee anything because we really don't know how quickly the county can act with the state. But saying that cuts it very close would probably be an understatement.
Okay, let's go to the next part. As far as this group that's here, the 6 of us, can we make it for a 28th vote?
Is there any time sooner?
I'm not here next week.
are you here this week? Oh, Amy's still gone till Monday.
And Amy's still out till when?
Monday, I think.
Till Monday. And the question I had is if this does eventually pass into 4 votes, does it have to go on this next election cycle? Can it pass with 4 votes and go on a different ballot date?
There is a procedure for a special election. It tends to be terribly costly.
Yes, that would be costly. I wouldn't be in
Sort of
favor of
defeats
spending the money for
purpose.
that.
It sort of, at least
But I
defeats
mean-
part of the purpose, but.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a procedure, I don't know it chapter and verse, for setting up a special election date when this could go on. But for the general election, my understanding is the deadline's August 5. And
It is.
I generally don't like doing things right up to the date, so just because something could always be, you just have to account for unknown and unknowable contingencies. Now, you have to understand also that because Senate Bill 5 passed, municipal income tax in general, the whole topic, is in somewhat of a state of a lot of people asking questions, running around trying to figure out what's going on, because that state law made rather sweeping changes to the municipal income tax system as a whole. I don't think it would affect this necessarily, but I just, you don't know. So at least a few days grace period would be greatly appreciated.
So the emails that I've seen on this, and sure, you know more about this than I do, but they've indicated that it's a minimum of 5 days, I think is what's been stated, and maybe longer. But if it is the minimum of 5, and this ordinance was adopted on the 28th of July, the 5th business day would be the 4th of August. So the city would have to receive, I guess via the county Board of Elections, we'd have to receive approval of the review of the language by the 4th, which is the 5th day of their review, in order to adopt that second resolution or that second item of legislation on that night. The next day is the cutoff for submission of ballot language. So what I'm trying to get to is if the state takes 1 day more than the minimum amount of time that they said they need, which, figure the odds out, then this is moot. But we don't know. I mean, we don't know
could
for
also,
certain.
how about Monday, the 27th? That'd give us 24 more hours. I'm just throwing that out there.
We
That
can-
gives you an extra day, possibly.
I mean, we're down to needing hours. And I know, based on your comments, I know you're saying words like, there is no guarantee, but I accept that. There's no guarantee, and but we would try, is the way I'm looking at it.
We would always try.
Sure, and I'm taking that, because I do think it's that important to give the citizens a choice. And on this issue, and to the degree of severity of our issue that we're talking about.
Jim, there's no question about that. There's no question that we should absolutely give the people the choice to be able to, to vote. I think that we can probably carry this conversation off and possibly maybe render a date sooner rather than later. My discussion points weren't done, and I'm simply not going to be cut off in the middle of them. So if we want to render another time for a meeting so that we can go ahead and further the discussion and topics, I'll be more than happy to entertain. But as far as being able to get cut off like the way I was, you're getting a no vote from me.
But
As
that
it
isn't
stands
why,
right now.
that isn't why you voted no.
Well, you cut me off. I didn't have an opportunity to finish my comments.
If you're raising a
We can have a
question,
conversation about this offline. We can potentially go ahead and bring this up for another vote.
well, I've had a hard time just kind of keeping track of what we're talking about. But it's already been said, the things I would have said to you with regard to what happened at the last work session. I'm not going to repeat that again. I wasn't a part of cutting you off. If that's parliamentarily acceptable for the chair of the meeting to stop someone and do as he did, which I guess it was because we did that, then it is.
It is, and if the council member who is, directed to cease wants to appeal the decision of the board to the council as a whole, that person can do that, and generally speaking, a majority vote of the council as a whole would be required to overrule the decision of the chairman in the absence of a specific rule on point.
Now, short of asking the vice mayor to consider that, and if we met on Monday, the 27th, the councilman can conceivably continue at that point, prior to us voting on the issue. No guarantee we'll get it accomplished.
Well, who's to say that we can't meet earlier if necessary?
Earlier than,
The 27th.
He's not available, that's what he's saying.
But Mayor Brewer would be.
Yes, but we
That
need.
doesn't
but
solve
that
the
doesn't-
issue.
That leaves us where we are today with one person out.
Well, I mean,
There's a reason you were cut off,
I
Matt.
think
and
Mr.
you're- and-
Rodriguez is stating that he would consider changing his vote. I had a comment I wanted to make
I
too.
didn't say, to change my vote.
I didn't hear that at all.
I
I
very
didn't
clearly
either.
had several
Heard
different comments
fine, as a matter of fact.
that, in relations to this issue, but,
Guys, here's the deal.
Well,
I'm
that's
not
not the
gonna
case.
play this game.
I'm not gonna
This-
play any
this
games with
runaround
you
game.
either.
I
It's
might
not a
change my vote, or I will
runaround
change-
game.
I
Listen
will
to
vote
Mr.
differently.
Messer, who's changed his vote on several different issues
Matt.
at several different times.
I'm not gonna have
That
a
is
council member,
incredible coming from
I'm not
you.
gonna have a council member, fearmonger.
It's not a fear-mongering position. I've stated my facts very clearly, Mr. Vice Mayor, very clearly. But, what you didn't do, and what you didn't allow me to do, is to explain the benefits of this. And
Everyone up? That's fine, Matt.
you said it so eloquently, Mr. Vice Mayor. Go right ahead.
I just want to add, as we're talking about calendar issues, I mentioned during the work session, I will be leaving town the 28th. My son is graduating from basic training. I really want to be there
You
for
will be
it
there.
in South Carolina.
Can you
so
meet the 27th?
I can, but that will be the last date I could do it.
All right, let's meet the 27th.
27th it
Can the
is?
council meet the 27th?
There's a
Yeah.
planning commission meeting that evening at 7 PM, so we'd have to work around that.
We can meet earlier
That meeting.
or later.
I don't think staff has any, well, I can speak for myself, I have no preference.
All right, so we got somewhere. I know we didn't unruffle all the feathers, but we got somewhere.
Well, fantastic.
Do I need to make any, is there anything else the vice mayor needs to do by way of support from that, or can he just say we're meeting the 27th?
A meeting on the 27th would be considered a special meeting at this point, so notification would just have to be
Right.
sent out. It wouldn't be a problem time-wise, as long as it's sent out at least 24 hours in advance.
So what I'll do is I'll just make a motion to have a special meeting on the 27th.
Do we need a motion? Can
What,
he just declare
at what
that?
time?
Do we need to be before planning
Well,
commission?
work around planning commission. We can meet in late afternoon.
What, planning commission is at 7?
It's 7, yes, sir.
And they need to be at 7 on Monday, the 27th.
They're scheduled to meet at 7
Okay.
on Monday, the 27th. And that was
So we can meet
that was a
at-
reschedule based on some
I understand.
absences they were
Well,
experiencing.
So we
giving
could-
us plenty of time, I would propose 5:30.
I was going to
If
say
we can-
5:30
It's fine.
from the left side. Are you good, Jim?
I'm good.
Mr.
I could
Crowder?
make that.
Yep.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yep.
All right, 5:30 on the 27th.
Okay, staff will
Thank you.
produce an agenda, we'll make the media notices, or execute the media notices, and there'll be, the agenda will include a second reading of ordinance 2015-082.
City manager's report.
Thank you. The next, the next meeting of the council will be on the 27th of July at 5:30 PM back in these chambers. Planning Commission does meet that night as well at 7 PM in these chambers. Just to remind the council and the viewing audience that the Chamber of Commerce Third Friday event will take place this Friday, starting at 5 PM. I think it ends at 11 PM on Mulberry between Broadway and Mechanic. And that's all I've got tonight, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
Mark, is there an executive session?
No, Your Honor. No
All
executive
right.
session.
Any questions or comments before we close the meeting?
I would just like to comment on the comment that I have not personally recommended any cuts. I will simply say that I have not campaigned for specific cuts to date because the majority of council is not supportive of that, and that is fine. The vast majority is in favor of a tax increase. I can take it.
Jim? Mr. Norris?
Well, I'm debating continuing, because we did kind of get it all back under the umbrella there. I wasn't going to take issue with anything she just said. I think that our job also includes, and here I go, so I'll try not to go very far, but our job also includes arriving at consensus, and sometimes that is not an easy thing to do. I think that's pretty obvious tonight, and it certainly can take some interesting twists and turns. But since we're meeting again on the 27th, and we're going to keep talking about this issue, I don't have anything that big to say. I always point out when I don't have anything to say and should not continue that staff does a great job with regard to the managing of our city, and we benefit from that. I want to thank the staff workers out there particularly. Thank you.
Mr. Kaiser?
The only comment I would, since things have been brought up, say is, like I said earlier, I'm in favor of local control. And the roads have to be local because they're not coming from the state and federal with the cutoffs we had. But that it would include our court system too, as a local control. I wouldn't want to give that over to the county either. That was a comment I wanted to make earlier, but when you cut him off, I got cut off too.
Well, thank you for making it there. Mr. Deary?
Since some people have done this, I'll follow suit and try to set the table for the next meeting. This is the most important issue that I have dealt with on my first term in office. It was a campaign issue when I ran 4 years ago. The problem has not been solved. We have a giant hole in our budget. We are suffering the effects of it. Is it Colonel Miller? Yes, sir. Colonel Miller, who spoke today, is just one of the citizens who's complained about the state of our roads. I ran for this office because I want to make smart decisions for the people of Lebanon. We have to face economic reality. This problem will be much easier to solve sooner rather than later. It will be cheaper to solve sooner rather than later. And I hope if all of us are open-minded when we come to the next meeting and we'll hear everyone out, I hope the council can go to the people of the city and unanimously recommend taking care of this big problem in our budget now. So I look forward to that debate. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Rodriguez?
I just think it's part and parcel, and I think you've heard it right here. I mean, you've got a council member who's unwilling to propose any type of cuts because the majority doesn't want to hear them. I mean, that's exactly what was just said. I just find it funny and comical, to be quite honest with you. But we've got an opportunity to cut taxes here. I'm saying that this plan for an income tax increase is the first that I've seen in the last 4 years of a composite of any bit of a solution. But I'm saying that I may have looked and found $1.5 million. Doesn't necessarily mean that's all that could be cut, but something. We as a council have said that we have looked at our budgets, that we've turned over every stone, and we've found nothing. And yet, of the 6 proposals that were sent to us, they've been the same 6 proposals that have been carried over year after year, except for what Mr. Clements brought to us last week. And that's only a part of what can be done. And it blows my mind that we're looking to go into the pocketbooks of our citizens when in fact we can make smart cuts, make the proper decisions that need to be made without having to do so. So we'll continue this conversation on the 27th. I look forward to it, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
I think I've said all I need to say, and I thank you for joining us. I thank for the Millers for coming out and talking to us tonight, and thanks for staying and listening. Thank you for being with us, and we will. Oh yeah, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I need a second.
I'll
Second.
And a roll call, please. Mrs. Dick.
Mr. Norris?
Yes.
Mrs. Monroe?
Yes.
Mr. Kaiser?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Messer?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Deary?
Yes.
Thank you again, and we will see you next week.